Here on the Creative Thinker Podcast, we discuss all theories, philosophy, and thought behind the creative process. And we hope that you find some inspiration along the way.
Hello and welcome to the Creative Thinker Podcast. My name is Henry Moon and I am joined by
Michael Vasquez.
Shout out to creative thinkers all across the globe. We are so happy you're here with us. Today, we're going to be talking to you about permission to be terrible. We've all had these moments in our lives where we come up against a project that is so big we don't want to mess up. We've all come across this idea we've built in our heads that is almost like an alter ego, where it's like what we could be, you know, this boogeyman, so to speak, where, you know, you're not going to be your best self. You're going to be bad at what you're about to undertake. And so this podcast is about indulging the intrusive voices, so to speak, and choosing to be terrible, choosing to be imperfect, choosing to embody that scary other persona that we envision ourselves to be when we don't do things well. And so in the true spirit of this podcast, we like to participate in the art, in the ideas that we are presenting to you. You know, keep it authentic. That used to be people's favorite word. So we're going to try to keep it authentic, and we're giving ourselves permission to be terrible in this podcast. And part of that is like we do our prep. We talk about episodes ahead of time. We have we have our screens here, obviously, that shows like what our points are, our outlines of the show. Make sure that we give you the value that you deserve. But today,
we're closing the laptop.
Oh no, okay. For better or worse. We have done very little prep and we have very few sentences on the board over here. So we are going to give ourselves permission to be terrible on air in front of the whole world. Mm-hmm. So let that sink in for a little bit. So I came across this idea on YouTube the other day. Mm-hmm. And it's a YouTuber by the name of Struthless. Pardon me. Yeah. He's an Australian guy. Cool dude. He's an illustrator, and he also just did his first folk song, and that's what the video was about. He always wanted to do a folk song, mm-hmm. and he never gave himself permission to be terrible. I think it was that video. Anyway, that was a really good one. If it wasn't, check him out. Struthless, Struthless on YouTube. Anyway, permission to be terrible. It's like choosing a task, like choosing that vision you have of yourself that is what it would be like to be the worst version of an artist, the worst version of yourself. And taking those component pieces, taking the outline that would be that, and making it into an art project. So like for drawing, for me, it's always like if I use a pen to do my sketch, if I, change the shape of people. So I like to mess with what shape limbs are and things like that. And I like it to not be symmetrical. And so I never do that because in my mind, that's like what a bad artist would do. So for me, I drew a poster size thing in ink of me and my wife. And anyway, just had a lot of fun with it. Took in all the techniques that I decided were really bad. It's one of my favorite drawings I've ever done at this point. And I've got it up in the studio, in fact.
Which is why we keep on looking over this way.
Which is why we keep on looking at it. So anyway, so I did that. It was one of my favorite artistic experiences at this point, and it makes me want to continue in that vein because it's almost like you free yourself from your own expectations, and it's also just like allows you to be completely yourself without consequence. It removes all of that self-doubt that it gives you a contrast of that self-doubt too. Like for me, I always have that self-doubt built into my timing. In fact, like I'll say if I need 30 minutes to do something, then I'll make it 45 minutes because I know I need 5 to 15 minutes of self-loathing there at the beginning. It's literally part of my schedule to hate what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And I didn't do that. And I completed it in, for 4 or 5 hours. It's a pretty big thing for ink and marker. Mm-hmm. And so I was just uninhibited. I was having fun. And that's what this episode is all about. Permission to be terrible. I allow you, if you need someone else to say it, it's better if it comes from you, but I'm allowing you to be terrible. And I hope you allow yourself to be terrible too. That's what this episode's all about.
Mm. It sure is. And terrible, failure, mistakes, those are all things that are going to happen. And that's what, we're talking about, permission to fuck up. And I think that is important to know that you have permission. You're allowed to do this, and it's not the end of the world, and you can move on from it. Everyone who makes mistakes is going to learn from them. Hopefully you learn from your mistakes. But the fear of that mistake could limit you. And I think that's what you were talking about, as far as like, if you had, worried so much that you were going to fail on the drawing, would you have gotten this far?
I wouldn't have even done it.
Right.
Like I don't draw things for myself. Mm-hmm. That's like a general rule. I usually don't do art projects that are for me, that are going to hang out in the house. I try to get rid of them. That's like my wife collects everything that I don't want to look at anymore. And it's like up in her office. Mm-hmm. So I don't go in there very much, or if I do, I don't look at the walls, because I just don't do things to look at them later as a viewer. Mm-hmm. And this, I want to look at it again. I enjoy it. I'm proud of it. I finally gave myself permission to do that for myself. And another cool thing of this idea, or a cool aspect of this idea, is that you accept the premise of perfectionism, right? Like we both, not to speak for you, but we both have this perfectionist streak where we want to do things exactly so. Mm-hmm. And to get out of that, you need to change the premise. And that was part of the video as well. I forget what his source was, and I wish I didn't, but we're being imperfect today, and that's mm-hmm. okay. So anyway, so if you change the premise to I am going to be imperfect, then you are already leaving behind the constraints and the normal framework of perfectionism. Mm-hmm. Saying, I'm going to be imperfect. That's goal one, always. And then this is what else I'm trying to achieve. And it was amazing. I'm real big about learning things from the internet, and I'm real big about being skeptical of those things because it's the internet. So, I tried that because it sounds good enough. It sounds like that would be a really cool solution to a problem. And then, but I didn't think it was going to work. Mm-hmm. And then I tried it, and I was like, whoa, I'm pretty blown away. Mm-hmm. It is so freeing, and I got so many projects done that day. Yeah. And I've been able to maintain that rhythm. Mm-hmm. Not, I don't have so many projects that I can complete 6 a day and be good, but but I've got enough projects that I'm keeping the rhythm going, where I'm taking chunks away at it. And it's like, okay, just remind yourself, your job is to be imperfect here, show up and do the bad things.
Imperfection is freeing. And knowing that you're going to be imperfect, because I think that's one of the things that my manager told me in the role that I'm in at work, is that while I'm not in a management role, this is the time for you to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. And that has really allowed me to have a lot of confidence in the decisions that I make, because I know whatever decision I make, I'm going to live with the consequence, whether it's good or bad. And I'm also going to have that forgiveness from my manager, which not everyone's going to have that, and not everyone's going to be in that role. But thinking about it in that way, as far as I'm, barely 30, and I'm making these management moves, and I'm making these decisions that impact the community around us, because I work at a grocery store. And so making those decisions, my boss can come in and be like, I would have done it like this. I would have done it like this. He's not reprimanding me, but it wasn't the way that he would have done it. So I could see old me would have been like, oh man, I messed up. I can't believe I did it like that. I should have seen it the way that he saw it. Well, he's got 20 more years of grocery experience than I do. And so
And so many suggestions from everybody who thinks they can do it better, right?
Exactly.
Like people love offering their suggestions. You know, you get tons of those.
Hindsight's 20/20, and if you don't have the stress, sometimes you can come to decisions quicker. I think just based on like that stress thing, we watch my wife and I watch Critical Role, and I see them rolling dice, and I know we both grew up doing a lot of mental math, but whenever I see them doing math, I'm like, it's this number. But we're also not under the stress of those lights and a bunch of people, thousands of people watching them. And that's how I kind of feel like people can judge me at work, but you don't have the stress of my manager and how is this going to affect, sales? How is this going to affect gross profit? How is this going to affect, like I said, my managers, the top store leaders? How is this going to affect the community? Those are all the things that I'm thinking about when someone else is like, well, you could do it like this. I'm like, got to think about it for a second. I'm like, no, it's not going to work. But also, I take people's suggestions and I'm like, well, maybe we'll see. And having that freedom to make a mistake in that endeavor, because very much my work is creative when it comes to like, I have a certain premise of things in my job task, but it's not like you have to, have this drop palette here, or you have to have this on display, or you have to have this. I have the creative freedom to match, what the coupon is and, what would sell best here. Again, what serves the community best. But like I said, having that freedom to be able to mess up, and it's like, this is the time for you to mess up, is very freeing. And then knowing like, oh, I should treat myself that way in certain other elements, whether it's, my workout goals that I have, allow myself to, mess up or fail in my goal or whatever. Take a step back. That's fine. Especially workout, your goal is going to be a continual journey throughout your life. And then in writing and in my creative endeavors and DMing and my DM planning, allowing myself, some things will fall and fail, and that's okay because we're all here together and y'all are going to give me grace to mess up. And, it is really a freeing experience to be wrong and to be forgiven for being wrong,
Yeah. Yeah. I think we had a good conversation about, I agree with all that. I think it's a good, self-forgiveness is a huge part of artistic creation. And you have to do it every step of the process. And especially when you're talking about like actual pen and paper arts, or like anything that is physical art and not done on a computer. Typewriter writing is harder than computer writing and things like that. It's like anytime there is a mistake, you need to adapt and work your way around it. And I think that's why I really like, film photography versus digital and all that stuff, is like when it's analog, there's more on the line and you have to practice that over and over, that self-forgiveness over and over. It's like, well, there's not a back button. What now? How do we make this work? I think that's such a good thing. And I also think, like earlier we were talking about this topic a little bit, and we were talking about DMing, and I was thinking about how like all the things that I would look at as like a bad DM. Like if you went to a D&D session and you were told like, okay, your character is going to die. It may be a couple of sessions, it may be, a couple of months. But that's the end of the game is them dead, and it'll probably be in less than a year.
Which is wild, because you were talking about like a bad DM. Oh, that would be an amazing story. And it's crazy how like, I think the point you're getting to is like flipping stuff on its head. I'm like, oh, that would be so cool.
Yeah. So like you're gonna die. You're listening to like techno music in the background, which is like a little bit intense for most D&D campaigns. It like puts you a little bit more on edge. Like I listen to techno. I love techno, but as a D&D player, like that'd be pretty intense to have on. And then on top of that, as you level up, the more things that you use to get better and set your place in the world, the shorter your life is going to be. And that being built into the game, I feel like those components would make for something that, I would try, but at the same time, it's like I'm not thinking it's going to be very good.
Yeah.
And that's Cyberpunk.
Mhm.
The whole game is predicated on those things, right?
Mhm.
Like there's lots of techno. There's like you get these power ups and stuff that corrupt your body, and the more you have it, the more you become Cybertronic. It's like everything in that game is about living hard and living fast. It's like you want to make the biggest impression, and it's all about things being tangibly short. And the point of that story is to say that the things that you feel like are failures and the things that you feel like are terrible actually have the same amount of creative space to make something wonderful in them. And that's the purpose of the exercise, is to find something that you wouldn't normally. You stumble into things like Cyberpunk versus D&D, right? It's a different playthrough style. It's a different variation of the same game, but I mean, it's cool to take yourself that far out of your comfort zone. It's really freeing. And the other thing I was going to say was that in like therapist, like psychologist videos I've seen, they talk about always assuming that you're wrong in an argument with your spouse or your, like people in your life, like say like, what am I wrong about? What can they teach me? And having that be your perspective is kind of part of the same coin, because you're going into it saying like, I'm already imperfect. So let me see how I can use this situation or listen to their point of view and improve myself, right? And you're opening yourself up to another experience by saying, okay, let me take the bad elements of DMing, or at least your perspective, my perspective, and then doing it and putting yourself in that place. And so you not only show yourself that you're better at it than you expected, because you took something that you have envisioned as this boogeyman that is going to tear down everything. If you were that person, you're able to take that and make it into something good, but also maybe those things were, or could be at least, positives already. It just helps you have a greater perspective, I think.
And definitely like taking that twist of something you're like, I don't know if that would work. And it, actually being something cool to somebody else. A lot of cool, I don't know. I thought like the terrible ideas as a DM, I think those would all make cool stories, and have made cool stories depending on like the storytelling, like you were saying, the power-ups hurting your character. I mean, you can look at a lot of anime right now, and you can see in certain anime that there are characters that do power up, they do level up, and it does shorten their lifespan once you like kind of get into the nitty gritty of the lore. Attack on Titan's a big one. Once you get the Titan powers, you have 7 years to live. Demon Slayer is another one. Whenever they have like the demon mark, if you're a demon slayer and your like fire breathing mark or whatever shows up, it's like you're set. Like the longest you're gonna live is 33 or something like that.
Oh, damn.
And so, but they're cool little story arcs, and they can make their own premise. Talking about being creative, like how do you take these terrible ideas and make them into something really cool and an interesting premise for whatever story idea or campaign idea you want to run it in.
My question is, what would make a bad DM to you? It's a personal curiosity.
I think what would make like a bad DM to me would be not letting characters, PCs, make the choices that they want to make. Like a super railroady game where it's like a video game, like a role playing game where it's like you only have two options. Which way are you gonna choose? And it's like kind of like a pick your own adventure, or like D&D, like you have so much more tools at your disposal that you can. There's no cookie cutter way for things to go. So you could have an interaction with what do you call them? I was going to say barkeep, but that's not the word. Like a shop owner. And we always hear like murder hobos, like kill the shop owner, right? But there's also, that's one path you could go, or you could go like trying to charm them either through spells, through persuasion, through bartering, through intimidation. Like there's a lot of different ways that you could do it depending on your characters, but leave that choice up to the players. And that's the way that I like to play is, I'm going to throw the world at you, and whatever you do, you do. Obviously, there needs to be some type of railroadiness so that you can get the plot moving a little bit, and some things need to happen. But for the most part, a lot, like to me, what would be a terrible DM is like sitting and hearing the DM talk more than the players kind of talk when it's comes to NPCs talking to each other and us. I don't know. I just feel like if the world was, if I was living in someone else's world and I wasn't able to at least have some type of impact, then I'd be like, well, this might not be the game for me.
Like, you're in a shop. What do you want to do? I want to look around. No, you can't do that. Right?
Yeah. The shop owner stops you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then
I'm going to push past.
Yeah, what do they have? They have 2 potions. That's it. That's all they got. That's it. Okay. Well, I guess I'm never coming back to this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's kind of funny because, like, for me, when I DM, and we'll move past D&D here in a second, but when I DM, in my mind, there are 2 paths. There's 2 ways it can go. Mm-hmm. And I look at it as like sort of like a sand hourglass. Like they might be venturing around inside there, but eventually it's going to flush out into the next chamber, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I always run it. Is like there's 1 or 2 places they make that decision point, like in a video game, right? Like you make, even in the RPGs, it's like, well, you can choose all your dialogue, but there's like 2 lines that decide how the story goes, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I run it. It's like once they made their decision, then they're falling into this pool over here. It's just up to them how long it takes.
Yeah. And I think in the world that you created, it's like it still gives us ownership for it. There's no like right or wrong. And I think you even told us like we went a way that you didn't expect us to go.
Oh, so many times. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but it still falls into that path of like, okay, here is like the tree of the beginning, and then you're going to start making these ideas going down. And so this was the path that I thought you were going to go, but you guys went down this Plinko path that went all the way across over here,
Yeah.
And like you touched base with like a couple topics I thought y'all were going to, but then you made this decision and that decision. And so in that way, I feel like, it didn't feel like a just like railroaded campaign. So yeah, I guess that was.
Yeah. I'll only bring it up to say like, even in our definitions of the words, we have subtle differences that change the way we feel about the campaign. Like for me, I feel like it's pretty railroady because I don't have to do that much on my end.
Yeah.
But because I'm not shutting down individual choices and I'm letting things play out, then you feel like you have the freedom to do what you like and affect how the story plays out. And there are elements like that are in there, that I build in. So it's just interesting to hear the different perspectives on like, because even your definition of a certain word can affect whether you feel like you're failing or achieving the goals you set out. Even if your stated goals are the same as the person next to you. I just find that interesting. I feel like we limit ourselves a lot as artists by this idea of making the wrong choice. And, this part of this exercise, if you will, participate, is about making the wrong choice intentionally, and seeing how that plays out. Because I've heard a lot of psychologists talk about this recently. My wife is a therapist, so I hear a lot of conversations about psychology, and so. Not that I'm an expert. I hear it and internalize it and spit it out my own way. But, that there is an idea in psychology that's basically like, if you put effort into it, it's not the wrong choice. That it's, if you try your hardest, like obviously there's levels to that, like morality and things that I'm not really trying to touch on. I'm saying as far as your, if you choose a profession, or you're like trying to choose between painting and photography or something, archery and sword fighting or something, that there's not a right or wrong answer in those. that it's just about pushing yourself to your fullest extent and seeing where you end up, because the act of striving is really beneficial. And there needs to be some trust in an outcome if it's going to be something you're going to repeat. If it's going to be a positive experience for you, you need to have some trust in the outcome. Like when I get out of bed, I don't set my feet on the floor and then hit my head on the ceiling, because I just, like gravity doesn't change. I have some faith in that. However, when we come to our art, it's like we're, especially, now that I'm kind of turning the corner between like amateur to like the beginning of like professional looking stuff, in a lot of the art that I do, it's like I'm still living in that moment of when it was really amateur and like, and I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. It's like, well, I'm drawing a fish, but it could end up looking like a tennis ball. I'm still living in that moment and punishing myself for that moment. Years later, when I know that if it does look like a tennis ball, I'll just erase it and do it again. And then it'll look like a fish, Right. And so I'm not giving myself the permission to participate at the level I am. I'm not giving myself the respect, I should say, of all the hours and time spent. That's what I'm trying to get at. So, what would you say? This is a risk, right? Participating in this is a risk. It can change the way you feel about yourself and the way you feel about your art and what works and what doesn't. So, what would be, some risks you've taken in your life that maybe artistically ended up good or benefited you in ways you didn't expect, things like that?
I can think of like a handful of risks that I have taken in my life that helped move me to where I'm at right now. Showing off, writing in high school or middle school, and then showing my teachers my writing. And then they were like, this is too bloody.
No way, they did?
Yeah, I played a lot of Gears of War and did like a Halo Gears of War fan fiction.
Guts everywhere.
Oh, yeah, it was rough. I remember reading it like as an adult, and I was like, I cannot believe I sent this to a teacher for extra credit. And she gave it to me. So that was cool. That was one of the big risks that I took that helped me at least develop and still want to continue to write. Taking a fight, losing the fight in my first fight, and then doing it again, I think, and then winning my championship fight. I think that was, I know we've had a podcast about kind of my journey to get there, but that was very creative, and it has helped me now with the athletes that I train, and how to create workouts for them in different kind of ways to be unique for them. DMing has definitely been a big risk for me, because I never envisioned, if you would have told me 5 years ago I was going to DM a campaign for 3.5 years, I would have been like, no way. That's not
no thank
happen.
You even.
Yeah, right? Like, I don't know about this D&D thing. But yeah, so I think those kind of risks, those are some of the bigger risks that I've taken. There's work risks and stuff, risks that I take as far as.
So I'm really curious, like, not to cut you off, We'll revisit the work risks, but a moment in your life after you lost the first fight, because anytime you're going into something the first time, like especially, when we're younger, like early 20s, is like a lot of people don't envision themselves failing, and that's why they take on a thing like that.
Yeah.
And so my curiosity question is, after you lost the first fight and then you have the next one on the horizon, it's like you have to come to that decision moment of like, I accept failure as a possible outcome. And do you remember that as being a conscious thing, or as something that you contended with at the time? Like, what did that look like, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. I think I've told you this before, like the faith that my coach had in me, my main coach, from when I lost my first fight to when I won my championship fight, he didn't have a lot of faith in me. In fact, after my championship fight, he was like, I didn't think you were going to do it. Which so that was the faith he had in me. And I had another coach, the coach that I currently am affiliated with Bailey Kickboxing Academy and Michael Bailey. He really had a lot of faith in me, and that really like spurred on being better and feeling confident into the second fight. But along the terms of dealing with loss and that being something that can happen, it was a struggle for a while because there was a lot of hype, right? When you tell your friends and your family that you're going to Florida to compete in Muay Thai, they're like, wow, that's cool. Like, everyone wants the best for you and everyone wants you to win. And they come back and say like, oh, I lost in the first round. First minute of my fight, I lost. Like, it was very hard to come back to that and to face that. But I think that's the beauty of the fight game is you're forced to see your failures constantly and in a very harsh way. There's no sugarcoating it. You lost. That's it. That's where a lot of fighters that talk now about, things are close calls that they lost. In the day, you lost, right? You can't say, well, I was winning in the first round and the second round. You lost the fight. If it was a 5-round fight and you lost 3 out of 2 or 3 out of 5 rounds, you lost. I lost that minute. If I could have gone into the kickboxing, hindsight, I should have gone into kickboxing. I wasn't trained in Muay Thai, but I took a Muay Thai fight on. Had I gone in kickboxing, that could have been a totally, completely different outcome. I could have, at least won the first fight, maybe lost the second one. But that was not the reality of the situation. So I had to really just, come to terms with you're human and people lose. People can be wrong. And having to like still train and get my head through the fact that if you lose again, that might be it for you, because who goes and loses 2 or 3 fights in a row, and I've been wanting to fight since I was a kid. So for me, yeah, it was very tough, very tough. Luckily, I had, a small group of people that really supported me. I really talked to my brother a lot because he's a martial artist. And so he not competed, but he trained for a long time. So I really just got into his mindset. I had a coach who was Bailey, who was really on my side and really wanted me to succeed. So that really helped me. And then my wife was obviously there to like support me and help me. She became one of my biggest pad holding partners because she held pads for me. And so going into the second fight, a year later, traveling to Florida again, it was all just about redemption to me. I was like, my mindset going into it is just don't lose in the first minute. Just don't lose in the first minute. Like, it can't be worse than that.
Basically accepting the consequences of what might happen.
And that, like I said, that was the biggest point. Was I was trying to go in and not lose in the first minute. I couldn't do that again. And so, like I said, my whole mindset was about redemption and not failing. I might not win. I also went in going knowing that, but I was going to go in and just give my best. Whatever my best was, my best. Whatever my best was, I was going to give it, and whatever the outcome was is what it was going to be. I went in hoping for a championship, and I went in just trusting my skill to allow me to get as far as I could. But like I said, I just didn't want to lose, which a lot of people, that's not a great mindset of you don't want to lose, you want to win. I also wanted to win, but I really, really didn't want to lose in the first minute. So I think that fear was still there. And just like the faith that like, it's going to work out. I'm going to make it happen. And I think that's a good kind of mindset, even into your creative endeavors. Like, you could fail, but also you could have the mindset that you're going to be the best version of yourself going into your next creative endeavor, and it's going to pay off and it's going to be good for you. I think for me, when I go into work, I go in confident. Even if I make the wrong decision, I still try and go in confident that whatever happens, I'm the best. Like I really try and keep that mindset of like, I'm good and I know I'm good at what I do and there's a reason why I'm here. And I try and keep that mindset into, coaching. Like, I'm good at coaching because I know what I'm doing and because I study it a lot. I want to believe I'm good at writing. I'm still trying to get through that because I haven't put as many hours into it. but I still feel like the ideas are good. I feel like the characters will be good because I have put a lot of time in character creation and world building.
They are.
And yeah. So thank you.
They are
Thank
good.
you.
I think something you said that stands out that I really, really liked is that you are basically, if it's all right that I reword it, is that basically you're accepting that you can exist between these two parameters, one being the best possible outcome and one being the worst possible outcome. And wherever you fall in that spectrum, that you're going to get up tomorrow and you're going to live life and you're going to try your best. And that overwhelms or like supersedes the self-loathing to some degree. And that's such a cool thing because it's like basically you're saying that you've accepted yourself and the possible versions of yourself, and you've done your best to prepare for both ends of the spectrum as you can see them, right? And that is such a valuable thing, and that's something that people talk about a ton with sports. That I mean, sometimes wrongly, like, but anyway, they do talk about it a ton in sports and in the sports world. It's something that you'll come across, and it's not something that you come across in just living life or just in participating in art. It's just not a concept that's really out there. It's like, well, either you're a great artist or you're a sellout or you're a nobody. And that's not what it is, right? Like there's great artist, there is nobody, and as the goalposts, and you're going to land somewhere in the middle, but you need to be okay with being on one end or the other. You know, come to terms with the fact that you might end up somewhere closer to one end than the other, and learn to accept yourself and accept the fact that, yeah, you might be terrible, but you still want to make art, and it's still a good thing for you. That's if you don't continue to pursue it and respect and appreciate yourself enough to pursue it, then you can never have like the redemptive moments that you were, worked your way towards. You can never have it if you don't show up. Right. And so, that's the only guaranteed failure is to stop trying, I think is the phrase I'm looking for here.
Yeah. No, I really agree with that. And what you were saying kind of spurred something in my mind as well as, trying this permission to be terrible will also allow you to really just go for it. Because at the end of the day, what is your goal? Because is your goal to create? Is your goal to be famous? Is your goal for, what is it? There's 120 different ways for people to be famous. There's TikTok famous, there's Instagram famous, there's Twitch famous, there's, famous in the sports world. But, think about how many people in our social circle, or not even just our social, like your own personal listener, whoever's social circle, that if you talk about LeBron James and this and that, and how much do you really know about him? I'm not a big basketball guy. I know of LeBron James, but I don't know all of his stats. I know that people say he's, one of the GOATs. But even his fame, not everyone knows him. So he has to be okay with failure. And that should be, if that's your goal to be famous, then, failure is a little bit more, I don't know, it's different. And I think what I'm coming to is for the everyday people, what is your goal? Is your goal to make some money with this? Is your goal to, just be able to do art for the rest of your life and that be your thing? Then it's okay to fail because you just need to reach a certain level. And not everyone's going to be famous. I know that a lot of people chase fame, but man, it's really not. It's not all that it's cracked up to be, I guess. There are other ways around it.
Well, to use a football analogy, right? So there's your Tom Brady's and there's your Johnny Footballs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so if you're not familiar with the football super much, then here's the example, or maybe U.S. sports at all. But anyway, there was this guy from Texas. They gave him the nickname Johnny Football. His name's Johnny Manziel. And he really just liked partying and being famous. Yep. And got to the NFL and did not last more than 10 seconds there, I mean,
Yeah,
they had some blowout party and got fired, and then tried to go to rehab and come back, and that didn't really work out because he just wasn't good enough. It's like the fire's not there.
Yeah.
Because just wanted the fame, right? And at least that's how it seems outwardly. And then Tom Brady, it's like they can't even get him to retire. Nobody in his life can get him to retire. Like he just loved football so much that he can't even imagine himself doing anything else. And he's like almost 50 years old. And it's insane that he's still playing a contact sport that's as brutal as football. I mean, that's amazing if you question whether he wants to play or not. I mean, you try doing anything at 50 that involves that kind of contact. I mean, anyway, that's got to be rough. So the point of that is to say, like, most people are going to be the average, not the exception. So there's a lot of people that are playing football, doing any kind of activity that are going to land somewhere in the middle. And statistically, that's your most likely outcome, is that you'll land somewhere in the middle. And the middle is probably better than what you're envisioning for yourself. And until you accept the possibility of failure, or accept the picture of what failure is into your version of yourself, and then, learn to appreciate yourself as you would normally, wink, hopefully so. If not, seek help, right? But but anyway, that until you do that, you're not allowing yourself the opportunity to be as cool as you have every right to be. And I think anybody can learn something. It's very much about repetition in life. If you're there and you're trying, I've met some people that have, very little to no education, that, are great at everything they do because they show up and they try. And I met people that are very educated, use a lot of big words, do all the things that you're supposed to do if you're educated, and are terrible at everything they do. It's possible to be whatever you want to be, but it just takes that effort. So this is like an eye-opening kind of exercise that we're trying to encourage you into doing, and it should be inspirational to you. In speaking of inspirational, Michael, what is inspiring you this week?
Man, this question comes
every episode.
In almost every episode.
You're surprised.
Blindsided. No, so I think I needed to vamp so I could remember.
Appreciate the honesty.
One of the things that has been inspiring me recently was it's so dumb. It's you know how YouTube figures out the algorithm of like one thing you watch and then it's a ton of the same thing. It was a video of like 15 mistakes that amateur writers make. And so,
dude, I just watched that. No joke.
Oh, for real? Well, there's a lot of them because it keeps on popping up on my feed.
There's a lot, but there's like one main dude that's like, he does all of these like writing videos. They're so good.
And then
they got like video clips of our movies and shit.
Yeah. Well, I listened to it, but I think I had it on in earlier today.
Anyway, go on.
Anyways,
sorry.
But it was just going through like writer mistakes, and I ended up listening to another video that was like 20 writer mistakes, and it was just interesting to hear some of the things that I've struggled with, and I think that's why I talked about at some point today was being okay with not having like the full outline, because that is a mistake that some writers make, is having this full complete outline and every decision your character is going to make before you even start writing. But like the writing process is what so many people love, is creating in the moment of the character and getting in that headspace. So that was what was inspiring to me this week. Because I listened to a couple videos like that. And then in doing that, you get to listen to different YouTube channels and different people's takes on certain elements.
Nice. Stephen King had a quote that was like, it doesn't matter your process, just write.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a catch-all for like, it doesn't matter what your mistakes are or what makes you different than other people. It doesn't matter because you're participating. You know, you're going to overcome those yourself. And he has like trust in you that you're going to achieve that and arrive at the goal you're setting out because you're writing. And if you're writing, you're doing it right.
There we go.
And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my inspiration this week, it's been hot as hell here in Texas. And just fresh off the, not super fresh, but pretty fresh off the boat from Alaska.
Yeah. The heat index yesterday was 117 in Austin.
Yeah, no, it was brutal. And I'm just going to work, you know, like the AC's rough at work. It's not always on. We have the ovens on, but it's relatively about the same heat. But just walking from my car to the store, I was like, I'm sweating buckets. And my wife goes running like, you know, 5-6 miles a day, something like that. And
at 2 o'clock, which is almost the hottest point of the day.
The worst time to go by far, no matter what anyone says. But so she goes, and you know, rain or shine, whatever, she's out there, and it's super cool. It's inspiring. But especially that day, it was like, I was like, just don't go run. Keep coming. Stay close to the house. Make laps, 1 mile laps or half mile or something, so you can keep coming back and get water or whatever. And checked in with her when I got back home, and she was like, it's like, how'd it go? Because she's not used to the weather either. And she said, well, I ran a mile, but I walked the whole route. And I was like, that's so baller. You know what I mean? Because it was like I'm dying just walking into the store. And granted, I'm not in that great of shape, but you know, like she's out there every day, and it's like literally whatever she can do to make it work. She's not only going to be like happy with, but she's going to make sure that she achieves her goal of making that loop every day, you know? And, it's just so cool. Anyway, so that's what's been, I guess, keeping me going, you know. I'm like, you know, just keeping myself from doing something. And I'm like, well, Gracie goes running, you know,
over
117 degree heat index day. Like she's out there going like, why am I just sitting on the couch when I know my task is right next to me? Like, why don't I just do it? You know,
I worked out yesterday, and my garage isn't heated at all. I'm sorry, it doesn't have any AC in it, so it is just heat. But there is also shade, and I was in there, and I have a fan in there, which, I mean, if it's in Texas, it's just hot air blowing at you. It's not really cooling you off. And I was like, man, I really hope Grace isn't running out in this right now.
Dude, she was.
Wild.
Yeah, dude. But anyway, we digress, as we always do. Permission to be terrible is the episode today. And for, you know, closing thoughts, don't tune out. These are worthwhile too. See your thumb quivering over the pause finger button. No. Anyway, so we've all heard the phrase, great risk equals great reward. No risk equals no reward. Okay. It sounds so familiar and so mean every time. But it's true. I mean, if you're not out there taking chances like this, like allowing yourself, like these different chances to push yourself, which is what the Permission to Be Terrible project is all about. If you're not out there expanding your horizons, putting in work every time you see it and it's possible for you. I was thinking about this the other day because everybody tells you work hard all day, every day.
That's right.
And it's true, but it's not true. It's work hard on the things that are in front of you to work on, right? And it doesn't mean, or like the things that are within your power to work on. So like if I'm walking around at work, then, you know, and I see something that hasn't been done and I know it's past time for it to be done, I'm going to do it. It doesn't mean that the entire time I'm there, if I don't have a task, I'm going to make up a task and I'm going to keep working. Like we do with creativity. It's like, well, free time is wasted time is like the mindset. But it's about choosing your work intentionally and making sure that you take on the tasks that will expand you, and make sure you do it as often as you can, and not hold yourself back. That's another reason I started the podcast to begin with, was because I started in photography at the same time as a lot of people I knew, and I was making tons more progress than my peers at the time, and I was getting a lot more clients, and it was working out great. And it was because I chose the discomfort. I chose to work hard, and I chose to immerse myself in things that challenged me and moved the creative goalpost forward, when they were just doing things that were getting them the most likes at the time. So, which, that's a good thing too. If you're trying to grow your brand or your business, it is a good thing to be visible and emerging on social media, but it's not everything. And so getting that attention can only continue if you have a reliably good product. And if you're just doing what gets you attention, eventually the product gets worse and worse and worse. That's demonstrably true across all walks of life. I'm thinking like the Jackass movies, right? If you only do what gets you attention, eventually you're making another Jackass movie. So yeah, you have to keep building those horizons and making yourself better and better, to make yourself a long-term product. So that is my final thought on this episode. Michael, what do you got?
Permission to be terrible is part of taking risks, and the fear of taking risks stops us sometimes from progressing forward in our creative endeavor and our physical endeavor and our, spiritual, emotional endeavor. And I relate it to Dragon Ball Z, right? You see them constantly pushing their limits and constantly trying to fight each other, and constantly you see Vegeta's always trying to match Goku, and Goku's always trying to match Vegeta, and then there's the villain, and they're really like, you're kind of in the way of our competition, but we'll band together and we'll get stronger together for this enemy. But at the end of the day, Vegeta still wants to be stronger than Goku, and Goku just wants to be the strongest. And so they're in this constant battle of really like pushing ourselves. And I see that as like taking risks. Like taking risks is going to help us push to the next limit, or push us past our limits. And it's going to help us level up. And once you push past those limits, you're like, oh, I know what I can do. For me, it was, training to compete in kickboxing. There was a point where I had to tell myself, I'm winded, I'm tired. It's like, but you're not going to die. And once that switch actually flipped and my heart rate was beating, I'm having trouble breathing, I'm like, you're not going to die. You pass out before you die. My old football coach used to say that. But once I pushed myself past that limit of you're not going to die, that helped me break that limit and go a little bit further and above some of the other people that competed with me. So pushing yourself past that limit, taking those risks creatively, take that risk, do something different, especially if you're in a rut, and really push yourself past your limits, do the uncomfortable things, and that will help you level up your, like I said, creative process, your emotional, can't think of the word, your emotions, your physical process. Really push yourself. It's kind of my final thoughts. Take those risks. Do it. Don't be a bitch.
Yeah, even this episode, I was like, when we set up the idea, I was like, dude, this is going to be like 5 minutes and we'll be done.
Yeah.
And once we started, look at that, we're past 50 minutes.
Yep.
And that's always the goal. So anyway, give yourself the opportunity. You're worth it. Go out there, fail as intentionally and as badly as you can, and see how you feel after. Try it again the next week. Mm-hmm. Make it into part of your routine. Thank you for listening all across this wonderful globe of ours, creative thinkers. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.